Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Forward with Forli Friday podcast. Hope your week's been well and you're having a great day. Forli and I are doing great. And today's topic is kind of a two-part topic. I'm going to try to answer two questions. One is, can a guide dog live in a home with other animals and or pets? And the other question it comes from one of my subscribers who is asking me to give my perspective on dealing with loose dogs or dogs on long leashes while working a guide dog. And those are great questions, and they are related, very much so, and they're pretty common actually. So before I go any further, I do want to say that anything in this podcast should not be taken as training advice, and it does not supersede any information, suggestions, guidance, instruction, etc. that's given by a licensed guide dog mobility instructor or staff employed at your guide dog school where your dog is from. So this is just merely some suggestions and some tips and some guidance and that sort of thing from a seasoned handler. So let's get started. Can you have other pets in the home with your guide dog? Yes, you can. The only real caveat to this answer is that the other animals have to be non-aggressive and they must be able to get along with your guide dog. Now, guide dogs, by nature of their breeding, raising, and training, are friendly animals. They're social animals. They are non-aggressive. They are not taught to fight or to self-defend or any of that sort of stuff. So they can pretty much get along with most animals. It's important that the animals currently living in a home, or the pets currently in a home, are okay with having another dog in the house. And so that is something that you will want to sort of investigate. If you don't know, maybe you have a friend with a dog. That's a nice dog. Bring the dog over, kind of see what happens. Part of many application processes at many of the schools is a home visit. So this is where a licensed guide dog mobility instructor would come to your home, and they will do a variety of things with you, but part of it is to help you assess whether the living situation will accommodate a guide dog. And that would be a perfect time to say, here's my pet dog or here's my cat, and this is kind of, if there's a situation, this is the situation. But really you want to have a household with animals that are non-aggressive, because the last thing you want is a guide dog to come in and sort of be living in a hostile environment. That is not healthy for anybody, human or animal, and your guide dog will not do well. They will not succeed in a home like this. So it is very important that if you do have pets that are aggressive, that you really consider working with a guide dog. And maybe you put that off. Maybe you decide not to travel with a guide dog if you can't find alternate homes for animals that may not get along well with another dog. It's very important that you do take this seriously. But having said that, there are many people who have guide dogs who have wonderful experiences with their guide dog and their pet dogs. They have a lot of success in the home, so it certainly can be done, and it is done. You just want to be aware of the impact that the guide dog is going to have, and just make sure that basically the other animals are cool with having a new roommate, so to speak. So that's really the answer on, can guide dogs play with other pets? Can guide dogs play with other guide dogs? Absolutely. Play is a very important part of the guide dog lifestyle, and having a guide dog, just like humans, dogs need a way to release pent-up energy and stress and that sort of thing, and play is super important. Playing with other dogs or other animals is very important as well. It's social hour for them. So definitely, guide dogs can play with other animals, um, and other dogs, other guide dogs, that sort of thing. It is important to, of course, enforce good house behavior even during playtime. So things like not excessive barking or jumping up on the counters, or scavenging food off the floor or anything off the floor, because that all translates to working a guide dog. If you don't want a dog to start the habit of scavenging, and then you going to a nice restaurant and the dog is scavenging for crumbs of food on the floor. That can make things very difficult. But other than that, you can play with your guide dog, and a guide dog can play with other animals. And I did a whole video on playing with a guide dog and sort of how to do that, and I will put that link to the video in the description of this podcast if you want to check that video out. If you're on my channel, it's called Do Guide Dogs Play? So the next question, working a guide dog around either loose dogs or dogs on a long leash. This is a tricky thing, and again, this has just been my experiences, and this is the tactics that I use. Again, they're not to supersede any training advice that you get. If you're struggling with this sort of thing, if it's becoming a major issue in your life with your guide dog, if you have a guide dog already, absolutely call your school's training department and spend some time talking with an instructor. Maybe even have a guide dog mobility instructor come out and work with you if necessary. Get this under control. You don't want this to get out of control. You really want you and your dog to be happy and successful, and you don't want any issues with other dogs. Of course, if something has happened, if there's been an ambush or an attack, you definitely want to let your school know. They will help guide you through that process. So, sort of in general, the tactics that I use kind of vary depending on the situation. The first thing I always do and would recommend to anybody is to maintain good situational awareness. And what I mean by situational awareness is knowing the environment. Knowing what's around you. Think about the area that you're traveling through. For example, if you live in a nice neighborhood and it's very dog friendly, the culture is kind of reminiscent of very dog friendly. Maybe you go to a couple of local businesses and they've got community dog bowls out and signs that say dogs welcome. Keep that in mind. Anytime you're in that sort of environment, you're going to have more encounters with pet dogs. That's just kind of the way it is. I feel like in the U.S. anyway, we are becoming more of a dog-friendly society, which is good and bad. It's great because people can take their pets with them, and it's more convenient if you're out for a walk in the park and then you want to go across the park and grab a coffee and hang out. You can do that with your pet. That's becoming more common now. The downside, of course, is if a pet is not well socialized. Or maybe a person might not be the best with dog training or handling. They can be anything from a minor distraction to extremely dangerous for a guide or service dog who's trying to do a job. So maintain good situational awareness. Understand what's around you, and even if you're not sure what's around you, just as you're traveling, if you hear a dog that sounds aggressive that's coming towards you, if it's barking, if it's snarling, if you can tell that the owner is having a hard time keeping them under control, maybe you need to take some other action. And that's a good segue into my next point is diverting. So if you're in this situation where there is a dog, it seems to be aggressive, maybe it's loose or something, you can try diverting, meaning you can cross the street and walk the same direction, just on the other side of the street. Maybe you've used situational awareness enough to know that in your neighborhood, lots of people take walks with their dogs on your street. That maybe it's a quiet street. It's a nice place to go for a walk in the morning. But if you walk one block east and continue on your way, parallel to the street that you live on, maybe that street's more busy, it's not quite as nice of a walk, and there's not quite as many dogs over there. You might, determine that, well, in the mornings I go one way, and in the afternoons I come back a different way, to avoid dogs. And that is really my stance on all this. I am very cautious around other people's dogs because I don't want anything to happen to my guide dog. If a dog is attacked, if a guide dog is attacked, there's a pretty high probability that that dog will be impacted. The dog may even be forced into retirement because it's extremely traumatic. It does a lot of damage, of course, physical damage, but also tons of psychological damage. Guide dogs are not trained to fight. They're not trained to defend themselves. Whatever natural instincts they have, they're going to use. But even so, introducing a dog back into that environment where something bad happened, it's pretty hard for the dog to recover. Now it can happen. You can fix a dog. I fixed one of mine. We got through this issue. It was very hard for both of us, and it took a lot of work, but we were able to continue our partnership, thank goodness. So I do err on the side of caution. And even if someone comes up to you and says, oh, my dog is friendly, take that with a grain of salt. The dog may or may not be friendly. Remember, it's an untested dog. You don't know this dog. You don't know what's going to happen around your dog. So really keep that in mind. I never let them sniff. I don't even like my dog to pass in close proximity, which is kind of going into my third point, passing and proximity. So if a dog is coming at you and they're on a long leash, or any leash, but especially on a long leash, you really want to consider your options. You can pass the dog, where the two dogs, your dog and the other dog, are going to be passing each other with no barrier, no human barrier in between. You can ask the person to put the dog on their other side if you feel comfortable. You can, and that way it'll give a little bit of a barrier. So they'll be still walking, and it's still, pretty close quarters, but there might be, having a human in between your guide dog and the pet dog might help keep things nice and calm, and it might be very successful. A third thing you could do on this and with this tactic is to stop, and if you can, step off the sidewalk a couple of paces. Put your dog behind you, so your body's kind of in front of your dog and kind of protecting your dog, and just wait for the team to pass. Just have your dog sit quietly and keep your dog focused, whether you're petting them or maybe you give them a treat just to kind of keep them engaged on you and not the other dog. And then when they pass, you get back on the sidewalk and continue on your way. What you want to avoid is any sort of confrontation or any potential for confrontation. I never let my dog sniff another dog when she's working. When Forli is working, and I need her to stay focused. Also, when you get that close to another dog, again, this is an untested dog. You don't know what their intentions are. You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe the dog decides to lash out, or it's just had enough, and that morning it just snaps, and unfortunately it snaps on your dog, and now you're dealing with a traumatized guide dog. So I never really let that happen, to the best of my ability. Safety is of the utmost importance. So I always try to keep them away. Sometimes I will just stop. If I'm not sure and I can feel my dog getting excited or antsy, I'll just go ahead and stop and have her sit, and I will analyze the situation. This goes back to situational awareness. Analyze what's happening in front of us and then make a decision. Maybe I turn around and go back the way I came to the end of the block, across the street, and continue parallel to the block I was on the other side of the street. Again, we kind of talked about that already. But sort of, again, going back to the diversion tactic. Now, for loose dogs, this is really, really hard to contend with, because you don't know where they're at, where they're coming from, and especially if you can't see at all, or even if you have impaired vision, it's hard to know. It's hard to see them. If you can, just don't walk towards them. I try to turn around, and again, I try to go maybe cross the street, But you have to be careful with this because you don't want your dog to be distracted going into the street. So make sure that that isn't the case. Not to say a dog can't cross the street, but for some dogs, they just run to the end of the block, and that's kind of like their territory. They feel like that's their territory, and the street is kind of a natural separation. It's not always the case, and it's not 100% guaranteed, but it's something you can try. If a dog is harassing you, you can try some sort of deterrence. You can kind of yell at the dog. Hey, go home, go away, get out of here. And kind of try to shoo it away. Maybe the dog will take to that and just leave you alone. I've had mixed results with this strategy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it's a really serious issue, get a hold of somebody. Go knock on somebody's door, walk into a business, flag somebody down on the road. Whatever you have to do to get this dog away from your dog, you want to do, because you don't know what the dog's intentions are. And again, I don't want to take chances, and so I just keep the dog away. If it's a situation where the dog's out in a front yard and the person comes after the dog, and you can ask, "Are you the owner?" "Yes, I am." Feel free to educate them. I wouldn't start off by yelling at them and telling them how bad they are for letting their dog out. That's just going to create a very negative dialogue and probably will lead to some serious confrontation. But, you can explain, especially if it's a neighborhood that you come through, you can say, "I come through all the time. I live here, around here. My dog really needs to be left alone while she's working. I can't have another dog interfering. So can you please keep your dog secure and on leash, or out of the way." And they may or may not, but at least just try to educate them on the importance of a guide dog. And you can always use the old example of distracting a guide dog is similar to grabbing the steering wheel of somebody while they're driving their car 50 miles down the road, 50 miles an hour down the highway. And people do tend to relate to that pretty well, so that's a good one you can use for that. But yeah, a dog that's loose is hard to contend with because you don't know, where they're going. You don't know what their intentions are. But those are some of the things that I do. If you're considering a dog and you're listening to this, I don't want this to scare you, and I don't want you to think that from the moment you step out your front door to the moment you get to your destination with your guide dog, that you're going to be encountering loose dogs and dogs on long leashes and people that don't care and all this crazy stuff and aggressive dogs. That's not the case, but you do want to be kind of aware that this this does happen. Some cities are more dog friendly than others, and that's another thing. You can kind of look that up. You can kind of research your own city and figure out, is where I'm living really dog friendly? And that can kind of help you to determine a good strategy for going forward. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns, you can always call your guide dog school. They will help with this sort of thing, and they will help with advocacy. I'm not going to go into what to do in a dog attack. I'm going to leave that up to the guide dog schools. All of them, or at least most of them, if not all of them, have a standard operating procedure for that. So I will leave that up to the schools themselves. That's really getting pretty deep into training stuff. But as far as just generally being out with your dog, again, have situational awareness. Don't be afraid to divert. Stop and get your dog out of the way, and self-advocate. Tell people the importance of having your dog not be distracted by a pet dog, and understand that yes, you have the right to walk on the sidewalk, but it might not be the safest thing to do so. You might have to alter your route, and that is a hassle. I agree. But when it comes to the safety and well-being of the team, sometimes you kind of have to take one for the team. So this is my perspective. These are the tips that I use and things that I use and have kind of learned over the years working guide dogs in these sort of scenarios. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you like this podcast, you can like it. If you want these to come directly to you, feel free to subscribe and spread the word by sharing this on your social media channels. And thank you very much for listening today.